Good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for joining us for this afternoon's discussion together with Daniel. Allow me to introduce the concept. We've done it once before, and that is we realized that there is so much more we could say on the back of any of the sermons that we preach. Daniel has been an amazing partner for me in dialogue. His purpose is to poke and prod and to clarify and definitely disagree with me. Occasionally inflame. And that's all right. If the attitude's right, we can handle anything. So Daniel, thank you very much for doing that during the morning services as well as the afternoon.
This is fun.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear. So we are here together with you to discuss, to raise any questions, any concerns, to share stories, to see if we can clarify things a wee bit further. But before we start, let us have a prayer together. Dear God, we thank you very much for this amazing gift, which is the Sabbath. We thank you that on a Sabbath afternoon, we can gather together and we can talk about you. We pray that as we do so, we're doing with the realization that we stand in your presence, with the knowledge that only you can reveal yourself to us. Keep our hearts in tune with yours, to be able to understand you better, to experience this relationship with you better. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Daniel, we had a discussion this morning, but there were things that were trailed off. There were rabbit holes that we would have wanted to go, but time didn't allow it. There were questions and there were statements that perhaps deserved a wee bit more unpacking.
The Bible is full of invitations from God. Invitations to be with Him, invitations to worship Him, invitations to be part of His community, and so on. The Sabbath is an invitation.
Yep.
As well. This morning, we looked at some texts in the Old Testament that gave the impression of exclusions. That there are certain groups or certain people who are to be excluded from the community. Not a very comfortable conversation.
No, they never are, those.
Yeah. I think being exclusive is, and we touched on this morning, it's to a certain extent within human nature. We like our own thing, and we like to put a fence around that and protect that, and keep it safe, keep it pure, keep it comfortable, and make sure that we don't allow any sort of contamination of that. And then what we find is this movement. As we went through the Bible today, we find this movement towards openness.
That's right.
This inclusivity,
the
inclusivity of God. And yet, particularly when it comes to the Sabbath, there is still one criteria, which is everyone's included who wants to be a part of it, who wants to be a part of God, God's kingdom, God's community. And so, could we say that there are some people excluded, but not necessarily by God, but by their own choice? People don't want to be a part of God's kingdom. They don't have to be. So in terms of us as Christians, us as a church, who wants to be with God? Who wants to have a relationship with God? Who wants to be part of this community? And there are, I guess you could say, some criteria for that, but the criteria is, do you want to get to know God? Do you want to be a part of this family? And for anyone who says, yeah, I'm interested in that, the door has got to be left wide open. And there's no, that's pretty unequivocal for us in the modern age. We're not in the Old Testament now. We're in this is the Christian church. And the unequivocal truth is God's kingdom and the blessings that come from the Sabbath is for everyone and anyone who wants to be a part of that.
This closeness and openness is a dichotomy we have to live with. Okay, it's not only human nature, it's there in the Bible, and if you want to read it, it's everywhere. Okay, but you are right, and we touched on it briefly. Attitude makes the world of a difference. Okay, because there are people who are within a church or a community, all right, who are as close to God as a lot of people outside that community.
Sure.
And there are people outside a Christian community who are more open to God than a whole lot of people who are inside the community. Attitude matters. Okay, that
So
makes
it's
a
not
big difference.
just open to other people, it's open to God.
It starts with that.
Yeah.
Okay, it starts with that. And it is manifested in openness to others. In the writings of John, the Apostle John says, you cannot say, I love God and hate your neighbors. That's inconceivable. All right? So you've got to start with God, and then that opens you up. Those doors that are bolted by human nature, they get unbolted. They slowly get loosened, and they slowly open towards others. And for me, that's a general statement of Christian life. But for me, we don't have any better time and place when we can experience that than on a Sabbath. We have opportunities throughout the week.
That's what Sabbath is for.
That is one of the main reasons that the Sabbath is there for, to open ourselves up to God, and through that, open ourselves up to others.
So you think, for argument's sake, if I were to simply make the case, Sabbath is for rest in the general sense, and talk about Sabbath as if God's not a part of it. It's just a day off. There's a difference between the rest of the Sabbath and just relaxing.
A holiday.
Yeah.
There is no question. There are a lot of people which do not include God in taking a day off. And it could very well happen to be a Saturday or a Sunday, coincide with our understanding of the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And have nothing to do with God. Now, that's not the Sabbath in the biblical sense. The Sabbath in the biblical sense engages one with God. Okay, remember the Sabbath day because God created you. All right, in the Exodus account. Remember the Sabbath day because God pulled you out of slavery. In other words, saved you for a purpose, to be with you. Okay, you can't do Sabbath without God. All right, and it has to do with people. All right, you can't do Sabbath just with God. Now, am I saying that you can't rest on a Sabbath? No, goodness no. All right, am I saying that you cannot sleep an entire Sabbath? No, I'm not saying that. There are times when we are so exhausted that the best way we can do on a Sabbath is absolutely crash. But if we do that every
Especially
week,
if being tired makes you grumpy.
or
No one wants to be
unpleasant
around
for the people of
grumpy
the
people.
community. But if we do that every Sabbath, then I believe we are allowing the world to take over us, even the day that God has given us. All right?
So there's a difference between rest in the Sabbath context and just laziness.
No doubt. Again, it has to be. There is a story. Okay, in Matthew chapter 3, chapter 2, end of chapter 2, Mark, and then it moves on to Mark chapter 3. When Jesus performs one of his miracles, okay, he heals a man. And in the context of that story, Jesus makes this statement that we are familiar with, and that is, the Sabbath was made for man, not man made for the Sabbath. And to me, that is a very important statement, because it says a couple of things that I believe are very important. Number one, we're not robots. Okay? In other words, God didn't create the Sabbath and said, you guys better follow it. That's not it. Okay?
It's not simple programming.
It is not, no, definitely not. God says, I am giving you a gift. Here it is. It's all yours. It is for your benefit. What are you going to do with it? And I believe that's when God opens himself up to see how we are going to use it. what's the most amazing thing in that story, in a negative way, is the fact that the Pharisees would only have allowed good to be done on a Sabbath when it was a matter of life and death.
Right.
Any other time they frowned upon. And I'm reading I'm reading about Jesus healing, intentionally going out there to heal people on a Sabbath, and the Pharisees reacting.
Yeah.
They said, no, you can't do that. You're breaking the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, you got it wrong.
Yeah.
All right?
That cripple's been a cripple for 30 years.
But
What's one more day?
But that's the thing. In their minds, doing non-life and death situation good, all right, is only reserved for the other 6 days. The Sabbath, you should not do good to others. And I'm like, how is it possible that somebody will take a gift of God and wrap it up and preserve it to such an extent that it will even prevent people from doing good to others? You can do good to others on the other 6 days, but there you do it on a Sabbath. And I resolved in my mind, this is what happens when we take a gift from God and we treat it like a museum piece. We wrap it up, we put it in a see-through cabinet, and it's locked and it's secured, and don't you dare touch it. And this is where exclusions come in. When we treat the Sabbath like that, when we treat anything of God like that, then we are pushing people away. When in reality God said, I've given myself to you on a Sabbath. Come hither, right here. All of you, no matter who you are, no matter what your needs, no matter how you are, and experience a getaway from all of this other madness on a different scale, on a different level.
It's interesting you talking about this idea of that the Sabbath being made for man and not for us. We've spoken about this quite a bit in the first 3 commandments when we discussed them, how in many of the ancient cultures, humans were not made to receive anything from the gods, so to speak. They were made to serve the gods.
Yeah.
They were made to be slaves
Yeah.
to the gods. Gods created these humans, whether it's the Egyptians or the Babylonians, in their religious mindset. God created these humans to serve us, to work for us. And I think just talking about just how a relationship with God and the Sabbath are so intertwined, in many ways your experience and perspective on the Sabbath can't be separated from your experience and perspective of God. And I can think of, examples when I can think of people actually expressing the opinion that that you're not really Sabbath keeping properly if you're having fun, you know. Or I remember in another church many years ago, Sabbath afternoon debate about certain activities that husbands and wives do with each other, and whether or not that's, hi kids, did you notice how I did that? Yeah. Anyway, and whether or not that's appropriate on the Sabbath, you know, and some very interesting opinions expressed in that discussion.
But I believe we're only having those conversations because we're treating the Sabbath as a prohibition.
Right.
It's not an invitation. All right? Keep out of the Sabbath as much as you can to prevent it from being defiled. Whereas God says, you come into my presence as you are. We come into the Sabbath and we think we need to dust our feet and have a shower and all of that and come to God all perfect, in our perfect attire, and absolutely. And God says, don't you think I see right through it?
Yeah.
All right? I did not invite you here because you're perfect.
Perfect socks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you had this
morning.
morning.
Yes. It's not about that. That's a facade. That is lying. That is
Although
not.
I'm wearing my holy socks today. Sabbath socks.
That is not what God is saying. God says, you come who you are, whoever you are, as you are. If you desire me wholeheartedly, I will take you with my arms wide open. The moment we come at it with an attitude of, it has been given to me, it's my responsibility to guard it, and it impacts other people, and it says no to this person, here is where culture comes in, because we need to bring that in. It's impossible to deal with it. We are shaped by the culture around us, and whether it is Adventist culture, or whether it is worldly culture, social culture, it's there. It's with us. I remember a time my mom was telling me this story. She said she was the Sabbath school superintendent in a fairly large church in Bucharest where I grew up. And she came to church one Sabbath morning, and she was met at the door by one of the deacons on duty, who turned her around, sent her back home to change clothes, because her skirt either was a finger above the knee or a finger halfway up the knee, or something of that nature. And I'm thinking to myself, what are we doing? What are we saying? Okay, if you do not conform with whatever expectation I have over there, I have the right to prevent you from coming to worship God.
Yeah.
How many stories like that are there of people who were turned away from the door because they did not conform to our expectation of what worship or church or Sabbath or God ought to be? Now again, all right, there are limitations, and I have no problem with limitations.
Sure.
But sometimes our limitations, especially when it comes to other people, the standard is far too high. All right?
But isn't this a case of understanding, prioritizing different values? The example you give, the person who turned your mum around on the door, he valued. And I'm being generous here. I don't know him, obviously, but we could say he valued modesty. Okay, is that a good value? Sure, it is.
Absolutely.
But he hadn't put his values in an appropriate hierarchy and say, okay, what is more important, this one or this one? And the idea of Sabbath and the idea of God's kingdom, God's community, relationship with God is absolutely come as you are. You're welcome as you are. And I just think to experience God in the way He truly wants us to be experienced, with real intimacy, with real love, it's something that if I'm really opening my heart to God to allow Him to come into my life in an intimate, relational way, I will receive Him. He promises. He's standing at the door and knocking. If I'm truly going to open the door and let Him in, and what I will receive in that through that relationship, and it's most definitely something I experience hopefully every day, but it's especially a focus on that on the Sabbath. If truly received, will result in the desire to then reciprocate. It's a receiving from God, and then the desire to
For a purpose.
Reciprocate out to others. Of course, that starts with family. You're a church leader. I've heard some horror stories of church leaders, not just pastors, who come and do a great job in church, but aren't such great husbands, to put it mildly, and I'm thinking of cases of abuse and horrible things that we won't go into. But so that reciprocating of the receiving of God, the receiving of the gift, will then be reciprocated to my family, reciprocated to my children, and there will inevitably be a desire then to reciprocate to my neighbors, my colleagues. Maybe I don't see my colleagues on Sabbath, but the people who I might see around me, and of course other people in church if we go to church, and so on. There's this natural desire to want to reciprocate God's love and His relationship with us to others and share that with others. That intimacy, that acceptance, that community.
I agree with you, and I want to make a point. But before that, I'd like to give a shout out to Philip, who's walking by and who's listening to this broadcast, and we thank you for doing that. The same with everybody else who is with us. Daniel, this reciprocation aspect of it. It is unbelievable that we come to the Sabbath thinking if it feels right, we do it, okay? When it comes to other people, okay? Or other people make me uncomfortable. I have met numerous situations where people who are struggling in life, some with mental health, some are homeless, some are drunk, some are smoking, some have social challenges, and they walk into our churches and they make us terribly nervous and terribly uncomfortable. And our instinct is to cut them out, to exclude, to purge, because they infringe on our comfort. And I find the opposite with Jesus. He intentionally goes where everybody else is uncomfortable. And he reaches out and he touches and he heals and he welcomes and he speaks to. And the disciples sit there and they see him talk with a Samaritan woman with a very, very questionable past.
And present.
And present.
Perhaps.
Yeah. I believe God has come for those who are ill, not for those who are well. And very often we treat the Sabbath as though it is for those who are well, rather than those who are ill, those who need it. And our practices and our behavior very often reflects that. Okay? And when it happens, I believe that's an indication that we haven't quite understood the God of the Sabbath.
Yeah.
We have created a bubble where we feel safe and secure. There's nothing wrong with safety and security. That's not what I'm arguing against. I'm saying that makes us...
And some of us are naturally shy.
I have no problem. I have no problem. It's perfectly okay. Some people are easier with others than the rest of us. No issue with that. But what I'm saying is, if the Sabbath is about comfort, we misunderstood something. In actual fact, the Sabbath ought
And Jesus grew up in a carpenter shop, which is the modern day equivalent is growing up on a building site.
Yeah. So we need to learn of Jesus. That's all I'm saying. And all his miracles, all his speeches, all his actions were taking God, him being God with us.
Yeah.
We're taking God out of God's comfort zone, if you want, and God threw himself in the midst of depravity, and that's where he served, and that's where he reached, and I think the Sabbath ought to be like that. So let me move into another thing. I often looked back over my decades of life on this earth, and there is I try to figure if
one or two more than me.
Yeah, a couple. If I had a choice, or because I have a choice to design a Sabbath, what would the ideal Sabbath look like for me? And for me, it has to be eclectic in that I have taken bits and pieces from my various experiences.
Yeah.
And I will give you the example of what the ideal Sabbath would look like for me.
Yeah.
But before I do that, I would like to make this point.
Yeah.
When God said that man was made for the Sabbath, not Sabbath for the man, God says, look, I've given you a gift. And my fear is that very often the Sabbath, we treat it as a gift. It comes to us. We say, thank you very much. We put it there and we just passengers.
Right.
We somehow expect that gift to entertain us, to unwrap itself and to do the things that it ought to do for our benefit or whatever. And we fail to understand that a gift like that requires purpose. God has made himself available in particular during the Sabbath, and he's inviting us to participate in that. It requires choices. It requires initiative from our side. All right? We need to decide what am I going to do on the Sabbath? What choices do I make?
Yeah.
So here is me coming. And there are a number of things that I would like to say if I were to make those choices. Friday night for me, I'm a minister, so my life is in so many ways contradictory to everything I say to you all to do. Okay? Because Sabbath is the day when very often I work at least as hard, if not harder, than some of the other days. And I'm telling you all, don't do that. Okay? Very often my work is judged on the performance I put on the Sabbath, not the other 6 days. So please don't listen don't do what the preacher does, do what he tells you to do, okay? So I recognize it's just an irony which is not right and fair. But if I were to choose it, I encountered something very interesting. When I grew up, Friday night would go to church. It would be a church service for an hour, then choir practice. Sabbath morning, you would go to church at 8:30 if you wanted to be part of an hour for prayer. Yeah. Then you'd have Sabbath school for 9.5, and then you'd have a divine service and would stay on for choir practice, rush home for food. Sometimes in summer, because there was a bigger gap, you may even steal a half an hour of a nap, and then you rush back to church for a third church service. Yep. And in the evening, depending when the sun would set, you either have choir practice or you'd go out in town with boys and girls and whatever. It was exhausting. Yeah. I have no idea how people survived.
It sounds like fun.
Depending
on how much energy you have.
Yeah, it was character forming, and I enjoyed it. Yeah. But if I discovered different things as I went through life. So on a Friday night, if I could choose, I would make that family time. Yeah. I experienced that when I went to South Africa in Claudette's family. Mm-hmm. Friday evening was a meal. Before we went to Vespers as college students and that, it was a meal. And that's when we caught up with one another. Very often in the week, you pass by each other. You may have a meal, but it's in a rush, and you got to discuss this, that. And on a Friday night, we thoroughly enjoyed each other's company, and we had food together. Yeah. Because food has to be there. Mm-hmm. All right? I loved it. I absolutely loved it. After that, we had the opportunity, because we lived on a campus similar to this one, okay, to go to Vespers with young people and enjoy worship. More casual than I grew up with. But the family bit for me on a Friday night is quintessential. Yeah. All right? On a Saturday morning, I cannot picture myself doing Sabbath without worshiping. And what I mean by that is coming to a church service or being part of a church service. Yeah. All right? Even when I'm on holiday, I intentionally look out. Even if I don't understand the language, I still want to be in the company of other people worshiping God. Mm. The only thing that prevents me from doing that sometimes is the fact that people normally want to know about you, and once they figure out you're a vicar, you're a pastor, and all of that,
you have to preach.
They invite you, because people are generous like that, and I want a break. Mm-hmm. So short of not telling the truth or insulting people, sometimes I don't go. But I can't. I'm a church mouse. I love church, okay? But the church I like is different than some of the others. I feel bored if I go to a church service and I'm just a passenger. Mm. Okay, I may be able to do 1 Sabbath, 2 Sabbaths, but after that I'm done. Mm. Okay, there's nothing. I need to worship actively. Mm-hmm. So even during these Sabbath worships that we have now, broadcasting, you were here this morning. The singers and the musicians were worshiping God. Yep. In there, we were standing here in the audience, and we participated. Yeah. Okay, we had to be involved. There's no way it's a Sabbath without involvement. And we're grateful for all of them and the work that they are doing to make this possible. So for me, Sabbath morning has to be worship in that format. Yeah. Okay, but communal. Participation, community, and doing something. So give me a Sabbath school to teach. Give me a group of young people. Give me, if you must, a sermon. Give me something to do. I can't worship with my hands in my pocket. Okay, Sabbath afternoon is without question food. Right? I enjoy having a good, healthy plate of food. No, a couple of plates of food. I am not ashamed of celebrating plenty, which I have with my family. But the hardest period of time for me were the first 3 months of the lockdown. I was not allowed to be with people. Right. I enjoyed having lunch with my family, don't misunderstand me. But I've grown up in my home in Romania, in Claudette's family, and us as a family, Claudette and I, very, very seldom do we do Sabbath lunch on our own. It always has to be with people. It's almost unenjoyable. Yeah. I hope I'm not insulting anybody. This is the ideal for me, and we've tried to live up to this ideal as often as much as we could. And if I were to complete the Sabbath, Okay, I would find something to do for other people towards the end of the day. All right, something that's missional, something that shares the blessing with others. So, depending on the church where I was or what we did, very often you'd find us in care homes. Singing for people. Here in this church, they've got different activities that reach out to us. I believe that is a wholesome Sabbath. That is a complete Sabbath. It's a Sabbath when we connect with our loved ones. It's a Sabbath when we stand in the presence of God. It's the Sabbath when we are together with other people and we do good.
Yeah.
To me, it's a busy Sabbath, but it is, to me, it is a worthwhile. It is...
Well, regardless of the specific ingredients you've put in there,
Yeah.
I think that the point that really comes out to me here about the Sabbath is that the Sabbath is participatory. The Sabbath requires, for me to receive the Sabbath blessing, it requires my engagement, my participation. I'm not a consumer on the Sabbath. Whilst it is very nice to sit and listen to a really good sermon or a really good service, the idea that I'm, to use your term, just passively sitting with my hands in my pockets, just receiving, and there's no way of that to be reciprocated back in any way, then you're missing the Sabbath. Then you're missing the blessing of the Sabbath, and you're missing the point of the Sabbath. Yeah.
Now, Jeff raises a question. Thank you, Jeff, on Facebook. We often debate what can I do and what can't I do on the Sabbath. What principles should guide our thinking these decisions, or is there no right and wrong on this?
That's a good question.
It is a very practical and very good question.
Yeah.
All I could say to Jeff or anybody else who raises this question is, if the Sabbath is a God-given gift with himself wrapped inside it, okay, a day when the community needs to be part of it, my immediate community, my family, and those around me, all right? And especially those who are marginalized in one way or another. I would ask the question, Jeff, what would help me connect with God this Sabbath?
And that's, it is a day for community, but God is the key ingredient.
You cannot do community without God. The community we as human beings...
Well, you can, but
no.
But that's not what Sabbath is for.
The community we human beings do, when God is not involved, it is very likely to be broken, selfish community. Yeah. So those two are interlinked. You can't. We live in a broken world. We cannot live without God. I really mean it. Yeah. When we do it our own way, every single time we've broken something. Right? So, Jeff, I would ask this question, and I would seek the answer in dialogue with the children, in dialogue with our spouses, in dialogue with one another. What can I do to connect with God and to connect with others during this Sabbath day? All right? For me, that's important. I'm not going to tell you, do this or don't do that. That's not for me to tell you. That is for you to answer. And I would suggest to anybody, pray to God together as a family and say, God, during these Sabbath hours, we would like to connect with you through this. Help us. If we're going down the wrong way, reveal it to us. If this is the right way, tune our ears, tune our hearts, tune our minds. So whenever we do what it is that we are doing, we are looking for you. And God, we would like to connect with people this Sabbath. Okay, when that person comes over to us, or when we go over to them, or when we open ourselves, our homes, and when we go and minister, we are not there for the fun of it. We are not there. We are there because God has brought us into his presence, and we want to take that presence together with us to the people around us. That's what we're there. We are ambassadors. We are taking God with us wherever we go. That is why we do it. And it will be very different from family to family, from country to country, from time of life to time of life. Because I may have super energy to do the ideal Sabbath that I described earlier on now, but give it another 10 years, and I don't even need to give it 10 years. You know, I'm exhausted as is.
Yes.
Okay, I may not
It's
be able.
sooner
So
for you than for me.
you see, so we will cut some of these things out,
Yeah.
but God will know. Let me.
So, but it's a good question to ask then at the end of every Sabbath. Did I experience God today
Yeah.
through the Sabbath? So the activities that I chose to do or not do, the activities that I did engage in, did those activities, though they may be communal, you know, they might be going out and ministering to people, out there, so to speak. Did I experience God through that? And that question, for me, leads us on to another question. We touched on it this morning. That the Deuteronomy commandment, don't do any work so that you receive the blessing, but make sure your sons and your daughters and these other people in the vicinity, make sure that they don't do any work so that they receive the blessing. And I wanted to ask you a very specific question for parents specifically. Surely we can't just ask the question, am I experiencing God this Sabbath? Have I experienced God this Sabbath? Surely we also need to say, are my kids experiencing God? With whatever it is that I'm doing with them or not doing, or and I don't mind the idea of we need to, you said 2 weeks ago of the Sabbath is saying no to the world. There may be some things we need to say no to, but how can we as parents, first of all, understand, are my children actually getting this blessing? Mm-hmm. How do we judge that? And two, what do we do about it? How can we make the Sabbath blessing one that is packaged for children?
Both of us
That's
having
a big
children,
question.
yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not a simple thing. I think it begins with you and me as adults. We need to wrap our heads around what makes Sabbath enjoyable for us, and enjoyable not in the entertainment sense, but in the true sense of connecting with God, the experience of connecting with God and others.
Yeah.
Because if we are not reflecting on this intentionally as adults, we're just going to go with the flow. And the kids will follow that same flow. But I believe that as we engage with the kids, asking those questions, debating some of these questions, things will become evident in us as families. No two families are the same. Generally speaking, we all have the same needs. But personality-wise, experience, tradition, culture, circumstances, all of these will change. Not only will things be different from your family to my family, but in my family will be different now when the kids are this age from what they will be next. And the kids pick up if there are any inconsistencies. So we need to help the children think through the process that we are adopting when we choose what we engage with and what we don't engage with, and why. All right? Even as a kid, I had an eye out for inconsistencies. So I'd catch my parents, you said this now, why are you saying that then? And now my kids do exactly the same to me. Nothing wrong with the parents, all right? It's the mindset. We are looking for patterns to recognize and to stick to. And patterns are very important. But if we train our children to wrestle with those questions as we do at their different levels, hopefully we'll come up with something that is meaningful. And I'm going to say something really, really that can be misunderstood here. Sometimes, if we are well-intentioned, in what we are doing, I believe even if we come out with what may later on be deemed as an unwise choice, if we are honest and genuine in our search, all right, it is better this way than going automatically with the flow. And God will overlook and understand, because He's not there with a whip to zap you when you get the wrong answer. All right, He will work us. Sabbath will transform us. This ought to be a transforming experience every Sabbath. So engage with your spouse, engage with your children, discuss what's the purpose and the questions. how is this helping me connect with God? How is this helping me connect with other people in a genuine, to take God, to bring them into the presence of God by doing this?
Yeah.
Those are crucial questions for me, and the answers will differ, but the exercise itself, the intentional exercise itself, will be meaningful.
Yeah. And this, I think this is very important for us as parents, because I ask the, priest, in inverted commas, of the priest of my home. I don't just have a responsibility to enjoy the Sabbath myself, but to ensure that those in my home, my wife, my children, are receiving that blessing of that interaction with God, that intimacy and connection with God. And it may well mean that I, as the leader in that home, have a responsibility to be far more flexible.
Thank you.
In terms of, if I have a child that I recognize, this child experiences God when we get out in nature, I need to take the attitude, I don't want to go out and say it's raining. Right, you know what, Daniel? Get yourself an umbrella and go.
It's not about you
because
only.
you have a responsibility to your child to make sure your child.
Yeah.
And you might hate being out there splashed in the puddles, and they're out there splashing knee high in puddles in welly boots and all of that. And I might hate that, but it doesn't matter. I have a responsibility as the leader in my home to dissipate that Sabbath blessing. And if I can see that my children really get a good experience, a Sabbath experience from that, I have to be willing to do it.
That's what the Sabbath Commandment says.
Yeah.
Okay, those who are in your care, so that they may rest as you do. And when they say rest, I don't think it. I'm sure it doesn't mean, just
Laziness,
flop out and lazy.
Yeah.
I would like to give a shout out to Aliona and Marcella, who've been with us from the very beginning. Thank you for watching faithfully. We hope that this is meaningful to you. Daniel and I enjoy having these discussions, and we have them before lockdowns and all of that, over lunch and over the phone calls and that. So thank you for choosing to do community with us on a Sabbath afternoon. There were a couple of other aspects that we jotted down that perhaps may be worth mentioning. One of them has to do with the traditions we have. You come to church and you sit and you stand and you kneel or whatever it is. I found in my pastoral work, as well as a regular worshipper, that the people who are involved the most are the people who get the most out of a Sabbath.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
There is something that happens by being involved. I don't know what it is. Is it that when I'm involved, I pray more? Is it that when I'm involved, I reach out to God more intentionally so that I have something to give? Is it that when I am involved, my patience is tested more and I need to reach out for God? So in other words, are these circumstances of involvement, is it because I'm stretched beyond my comfort zone and that throws me back into the arms of God? There is meaning in being purposeful on a Sabbath and being a blessing and a gift to others. In one of my former churches, I tried a couple of times a year. I tried to shut down church. So people would come for Sabbath school and would all do Sabbath school, no problem. But for divine service, we divided the entire congregation in groups. And we organized 3, 4, 5 care homes where people, during divine service, they would go out there and there will be 3, 4, 5, 6 cars which will go to people who couldn't come to church and do a divine service in their homes. Yeah. What was sure was that I, as a pastor, locked everybody out the church. I jumped in my car and I went with one of the groups. Yeah. And I said, go and be a blessing to people. There were a lot of, the people understood the purpose, but there were a lot of groans. I want to do the service and go in the afternoon. There was discomfort. Yeah. Okay? And I was fully aware of the discomfort I was causing and how, because we announced it in advance, some people wouldn't come to church that Sabbath, and for good reasons probably. I got no issue with that. But I know something else to make that same point, and that is when people came back, because they would all come back for lunch. That was part of it.
Yeah.
All right. When people came back, they were hyper.
Yeah.
They were bursting
Yeah.
with adrenaline and joy and why don't we do this every month? It's like, because I can't put up with the moans and the no, it's
Yeah.
not. It's why don't we do it? And I said, exactly.
So
What
you
stops
would have
us?
failed if you tried to do it every month. But
Well,
COVID-19 has succeeded where it
they-
shut down the church.
There you go. But it proves the point, and that is being a blessing to others
Yeah.
gives meaning
Yeah.
to my worship.
Yes.
We now
and
during
my relationship with God.
and and other people relationship with that during the lockdown and during this period of time when we're only broadcasting. I know there are a lot of you out there who are itching. You just miss being involved. You want to be involved, and the opportunities are almost non-existent for now. Those who are involved here, there were some of the folk that come here and help us week in and week out, say to me, I'm so happy that I can do something on a Sabbath, even though there aren't no people here, the few that are. I'm so happy, it gives meaning.
Yeah.
And I would like to say to everybody, we are in a large church here. And it's a blessing and not so much of a blessing, because sometimes you think what somebody else can do it. And I believe that temptation to adopt that attitude is dangerous for one's spiritual well-being.
It's comfort.
It may be comfort, but it's spiritually
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Because we adopt the same attitude that we adopt during the week. We are consumerists.
Yeah.
We come over here and somebody services me. Somebody services the Sabbath school for me. Somebody services the main the divine service. Somebody looks after my kids during Sabbath school, during Pathfinders, during Adventurers. I'm a well-kept person.
And that's great, as long as it doesn't go beyond 12:45.
Yeah, well, that too. But what happens to me, I become stunted.
Yeah.
I am no longer, nothing is at a point in time, nothing's going to satisfy me. Because nobody can satisfy all our desires for everything.
If we're looking for it.
If we're looking for that.
In just being served, in just being serviced, in just being entertained.
Entertained.
Perhaps. Yeah.
So what I'm saying to everybody is use the Sabbath. There's no problem disconnecting from the world and resting and recapturing who we really are, no problem. But we find much more about ourselves and much more about God, and we feel much more in oneness with God and with others when we're actually involved than we just...
So wouldn't it be great if, circumstances permitting, with the lockdown and all that, if when we start meeting as a church again, if everybody who came had more of a job to do than just warm this seat, that we're coming with a purpose and an engagement and a sense of not drudgery, but a sense of responsibility that is exciting, even fun, but most of all that is fulfilling and really fulfilling. That's what Sabbath is supposed to be.
I agree with you.
That's what worship on Sabbath, and that's what congregating on Sabbath is supposed to be.
In that sense, large congregations have a built-in deficit.
Yeah.
And that is, you can get lost in a large congregation, and you can feel threatened by the performance of other people, and you tend not to be involved. But I'm telling you, I tell you from experience.
We can think creatively around that.
There's no question about that.
We can think creatively.
There's no question. All we need is willing people.
Absolutely.
In my experience, I grew up in a church of 400 or 500 people. All right. The reason I'm in church is because some people said, let's start a children's choir. And I was part of that children's choir from when I was that age. All right. If it were not for them to give me a purpose and a meaning in church, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And then somebody else came along and said, let's create a junior choir. And I happened to have been part of that. If it were not for those, especially during teenage years, I would not have been interested in God. I really wouldn't. There was a time in my life when
Or
my
in
life...
church.
Or the church.
Gave you a reason to come to church.
No question.
Yeah.
There was a time in my life when my lifestyle choices left a lot to be desired. And yet, some people, I believe led by God in retrospect, reached out to me and said, notwithstanding your choices, we would like you to teach this teenage Sabbath school class. They're all yours. I'd never taught anybody before. I was struggling with choices in my life. And yet they said, I tried to say, but you know I'm not the right. I said, no, we know. But we want you to do it. And I did it. And it was many years later when I had young people come to me unsolicited, when I visited Romania, do you remember me? So I had to say, look, I'm really sorry. He said, I was one of your kids. You were the best we had at that time. Yeah. And I'm thinking, why? How? I was not ready. I was not the right person. But somebody, sorry?
You were willing.
I was willing, and somebody reached out, and it transformed my life. And by the grace of God, not me, it transformed others. I left Romania, I went to Israel, and encountered a congregation which, culturally speaking, lacked something. Yeah. Because for me, church without choir, was just not church.
All those years of choir, and they didn't teach you how to sing.
You see? So I went there and I said, I've never studied music. Why don't we have a choir? Well, nobody's leading it. So I said, it's okay, I'll lead. Yeah. I said, I have no idea how to, do a whole lot of music, but I will lead.
And we're having this conversation here, right? But we're talking to people.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Let's be clear about who we're talking to. We're not, when we talk about engagement for the young people, we're not talking to the church board. We're talking to parents.
Yeah.
We're talking to families. We're talking to everybody.
I'm talking to people that are coming to church, all right, and are not keeping their hands.
We're not saying, well, the board needs to organize this. No.
I'm talking to individuals. You're right. I sat there in Israel in the church.
This is a rallying cry for people, for everyone.
Yes, but this is not a promotion, a marketing thing. This is genuinely. You want to have a rich spiritual experience, get involved. In the community, and the opportunities are tremendous out here in our church. I went around and I said, anybody knows how to play the piano? And I said, okay, I know. Anybody who sang alto before, anybody who sang tenor, anybody who sang soprano, and I put a bunch of people together and I said, okay, let's sing, all right? And we were not BBC production, we were not even regular church production, but we were willing. Yeah. And God was praised as a result of that, and good things came, and people wanted to come to church, and people wanted to be involved in church. And all of a sudden, it was a growing experience in God. It drew them closer to God through what they were putting into it. And then I moved over to South Africa and I repeated exactly the same thing. Never quite settled for that which I had done before. Always wanting to push more. Always wanted to be outside my comfort zone, because that's when you go there to the edge, you realize how dependent you are on God. And Sabbath is an exhilarating experience.
Yes, but that point, dependence on God, a little while ago, you mentioned in the Bible how it talks about Jesus came for the sick, not for the well. And it can be very tempting for us, Christians, to think that we're the well. We are the healthy ones, and we need to... And that's fine if it's all about us getting out there and serving the community. But when I look at myself in the mirror, metaphorically speaking, I think, who are you kidding? Who are you kidding, Daniel? Come on. I'm in need of healing just as much as anybody else. I'm as flawed as anybody else. And my need every day for connection with Jesus, for intimate connection with God, and the healing that comes from that is so much greater. So the service that you're talking about, or not service, but participation that you're talking about is, yes, we're taking healing to others, but in the process, we're receiving healing.
And yes, I believe it happens in the process. Okay? Very often Jesus healed people and gave them a mission. Yeah. Right? He didn't just heal them and say, go home and be well.
Yeah.
All right? He said, go and tell the people. Okay, go and reach out. Okay, so you are healed, and in the process you become a blessing. Picking on the healing bit, we wanted to touch on this last time. In Exodus chapters 25 to 31, there are 7 speeches. When the speeches are introduced with God said to Moses. So Exodus 25 to 31. The 7th speech is about the Sabbath. Okay, you've got to like the numbers over there. All right, and this is what it says, okay? The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. There will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. Interesting, okay? I am who I am, God, and you've got to remember who I am, and by association with me, you will be changed. But this is the bit I like. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever, for in 6 days the Lord made heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. God rested and was refreshed. Now I looked a little bit around, and in Hebrew the word used is self. Okay? So if you were to translate that expression literally, it would be God was re-selfed. God claims his self back. Okay? It may have been depleted, or if the language is our human language to describe God, okay, there was a depletion that took place, and in the Sabbath, that lack was being filled. Okay? And I believe this is what the Sabbath is for us. Okay? During the rest of the week, we spend ourselves. We're empty. We come on a Sabbath and we are re-selfed. It's similar to an air conditioning. You use it, and eventually you need to regas it. You need to fill it right back up. And this is what we do. So you are right. We are just as broken and in need of healing as the world out there. And the Sabbath ought to provide that to us. Yeah. So balance and measure.
And I wouldn't want people listening to think that you have to attain something before you can be of benefit to others on the Sabbath. Like, no, we're all broken. I'm broken. No one is more aware of that than me. My own flaws and my own shortcomings and my own struggles.
Yeah.
And so Sabbath, gathering together on Sabbath in a church context, is not a place where the well put together serve the unhealthy. It's where we all come with our brokenness and we all serve. But I like that idea of being reselved, and I think the passage that you alluded to there, the final bit, the re-selfing, has a lot to do with the bit at the beginning. I am the Lord who makes you holy. So we're not holy. We can't make ourselves holy. God makes us holy.
That's a concept. For me, holy is not a mechanical thing.
Okay, but just to take the text
statement,
it's God who does the work in our lives, on us.
If I'm standing in the presence of God, okay, and this is the important bit. When I stand willingly in the presence of God, I am deemed right with God. Because if I didn't want to be there, I wouldn't be there. And God would not drag me in there by force. The devil is the one that forces, not God. Okay? But because I'm there in my imperfection, because my attitude is right, that deems me, if you want, holy, righteous, right with God in my attitude. Are my tendencies gone? No. They're still there. Okay? Are my thoughts all pure? No, they're not. But I stand there and I look into God's eyes and I say, Father, help me in my unbelief. Help me in my struggles. That's all I can say. And that prayer, okay, is what opens us up to God. And very often God keeps us there to talk to us, to engage with us. And we don't realize it, But before not too long, we find ourselves still talking to God while walking. All right? And God reaches out and touches this person as he's filling me up. And I find myself pottering around together with God. God does the healing in that other person's life, but I'm right there. I'm the gopher, if you want, for God. All right? And before not too long, God says, why don't you do it? I'm still broken, but dependent on God. To me, that's maturity. And
There's an element of submission.
complete and utter and
There's
continual submission.
acceptance that, God, I need you to do for me what I can't do for myself. What I don't
Sure.
have the power or the wisdom to do for myself. I'm deficient.
But I don't sit there with, sit on my hand and say, okay, now do for me what I can't do for myself.
No.
We're busy. And it
God's
is,
inviting us to participate
that's the one.
in the process.
Because that's what God does.
Yeah.
So,
Like John, I'm a man of unclean lips.
Yeah.
And then God says, hey, I got a work for you to do.
we have Jeff's question still lingers. What can I do? What can't I do? So I want to add another question, perhaps, or rephrase one of them. What reselves me on a Sabbath? That's a mature question to ask. God, what helps me claim myself back on a Sabbath? Because it is definitely thwarted by all the other things
or
during the
allow
week.
you to reclaim
Or
me.
allow you to reclaim.
Yeah.
Those are questions, good questions
All
to
of the other
pose.
things that I've been giving myself away to, how do I reclaim them for God and say, God, you reclaim me?
So it's very interesting. The second and the fourth commandment are the longest in the 10. The second one talks about images, gods, idols. And this is what we're busy making throughout the week. Okay? This is what we are forced to worship. It's figuratively, okay, to submit to throughout the week. The Sabbath commandment, the fourth commandment, is the one who says no other God has a claim on you. I am the only God. Let go of all the others. You're not their slave. You are my child.
Yeah.
All right?
I can remember when the experience of holding my child in my arms for the first time, both of them. It's this wonderful moment where you hold this baby, and for me, at least, I felt this tremendous sense of ownership. You're mine. I made you with a little help from your mum, and from God, of course. But that for me, what I experienced was this tremendous desire for this tiny little life to always know you have meaning because I made you and I love you unconditionally. And I think God gave us that experience so that we can relate to him. He's that Father, he's that Creator. And I think the re-selfing is coming back to that, coming back to I am loved unconditionally. He made me, he put me together, and the central part of my identity is that I belong to Jesus. This is it. And Sabbath's a great opportunity to come back to that. But what a wonderful opportunity to come back to this is who I am. I am loved by God, I am made by God, I am held in the palm of his hand, and now I can take that and I can go out again into the world and do my best to live that.
But this is not an easy process. How do I know it? The people of Israel were slaves for 400 years. And God comes and miraculously and powerfully rescues them out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And brings them, overnight, turns them from day in and day out, serving ruthless masters with almost nothing to their names, the Israelites. Takes them into a situation where God provides their water, God gives them food every single day, God provides them shelter and light in the night, God defends them from all their enemies.
Stops their clothes wearing out?
Stops their clothes.
Yep.
All they had to do was to rest and enjoy in the provision and the presence and the relationship with God. And you know what? They regularly keep crying for the garlic and the onion of Egypt. They keep crying for Pharaoh and whatever because they do not learn to rejoice and experience God. In actual fact, the Bible says that they wandered in the desert, they went in circles for 40 years until an entire generation died. That's how slow our thinking changes. An entire generation died.
Moses went up the mountain. In 5 minutes, they're making an idol.
Yes, but that was at the beginning. I
Yeah.
understand that failure at the beginning.
Yeah.
But 40 years,
It's ingrained.
and all they want is rid of this experience of complete dependence on God. They want to earn their land. They want to work their land. They want to produce their land to produce. They want to become masters on their own. A whole generation passes away, and you hopefully they realize how dependent they've always been. They will always be. And Joshua comes along and says, would you please commit yourselves to always remember God, to always come to God on a Sabbath and remember it and keep that, because it is a reset. Okay?
A similar thing happened when they asked for a king.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
They wanted someone to rule over them and to fight their battles for them and to be their champion.
and those changes are very slow, but when they happen, they are amazing. Okay? And they happen by choice. We need to choose how we engage with God on the Sabbath. All right? We need to be absolutely intentional about this as families and as individuals. And if we don't, we're just going to go with the flow, and one Sabbath will wash over us as the next one will, and we're going to be confronted by problems throughout the week and will not be able to withstand them. Because my understanding is the way I live the Sabbath, I live the other 6 days. It's not the way I live the other 6 days, I live the Sabbath. It's the exact opposite. This ought to spill out, not that spill in. So when the Sabbath opening, sunset for us comes, I don't want to come stumbling upon it, bringing the dirt of the week in with me. No. I actually want to come in well in advance. The Friday is called Preparation Day. And I know in my families at home, my mom used to cook on a Thursday. Thursday night was the busiest.
I had to make sure my room was tidy by the end of Thursday.
That's right.
That was my job.
That's right.
Mopping the floor in the hallway on
And
the laminate floor.
I've kept that all along.
Yeah.
All right, even in my family. Claudette, my wife, is insisting that the boys and I start tidying up on a Thursday because that's how you prepare for the Sabbath. So when the Sabbath comes, you don't have to be distracted by any of these things. Because this is the day that I am preparing for. And when Sabbath, I remember as a kid, because I was eager and all of that, when I couldn't wait for the Sabbath to close. And I'm thinking, what have I missed? All right? If I had made the Sabbath a delight, then perhaps I would have approached it differently.
Sabbath was the only day I was allowed ice cream.
Oh, look at that. Your parents knew what you were doing. I'd like to acknowledge Martina Herbert. She's with us online. Very helpful, she says, especially as I'm the only Christian in my family and my husband and children are happy to participate in Sabbath to some extent. Martina, this is wonderful, and nothing will happen overnight. It is a process of growing, it's a process of maturity. But if you let your relationship with God not only be genuine, but let it spill out, let it ooze out, it will become contagious. Okay, what I want you to know is not be constrained by do this and do that and don't do this and don't do that. Be intentional, grow in maturity in your relationship with God and engage with Him on reasons. God, I would like to do this because I sense that this will enable us to connect, or this may be a blessing to my husband or my children. Engage with God, and God will reveal Himself to you, and God will guide your thinking to make choices which will bring Him glory and will be a benefit to those around you. It's not an easy cross to carry, but I believe it is possible. And I know families where one of the spouses was Christian and the other one wasn't. the story that I'm thinking of, that's back in my childhood. Okay, the husband would be forceful on the wife because she was a Christian, and he would drink, and it was physical abuse. And for decades of marriage, she endured all of that, and she never complained. She always prayed for him. And somehow, miraculously, nobody can tell, at a point in time, the man had a turning of heart, and he gave his life to Jesus, and he became a humble individual, happy to help. And as I was a teenager by that time and growing into my young adulthood, and I heard a little bit of the story, I noticed them coming to church and walking away from church hand in hand. And I witnessed the man privately when he was a credit to the Lord Jesus. And his wife was that witness, that constant witness that never gave up, never shouted, never screamed. She actually served him and allowed the God that she knew, and it was a heavy cross to carry. All right.
And I think this message you've just read, I think it's a really important point, because I don't want to be hypocritical here, right? I've got a godly wife, okay? Who are you to say this, Daniel? It's easy for me to say, but from my situation. But I do acknowledge that there's a lot of people in more tricky, more difficult situations than the one that I've been blessed with. And I fully acknowledge that, and accept that that's hard. And I don't think in situations like that, I don't think it's easy for us to just give some glib prescription, like, oh, just do that, as if that would just solve all your problems. No. But like you, I've also witnessed other people who are the only person participating in Sabbath, the only person participating in Christian faith in their home. And I would just say to those people to, well, first of all, it's an opportunity for us as a church to recognize who those people are and try and include them more on the Sabbath. I think there's a responsibility for them to let us know, so that, because often, particularly in a 700-member church, you don't know who's who or what people's needs are. But I also think it's an opportunity for people like that to say, okay, I may be the only person observing Sabbath in my home, but what an opportunity to bless the other people in my home.
And by the sound of things, that's what she's doing.
Which is brilliant, which is wonderful. So inspiring.
Yeah.
That's so inspiring that this, for so many of us, the only people we experience on the Sabbath are other Sabbath keepers. But when there's stories like this of people who are able to say, the people around me, my housemates, whoever they are, look forward to Sabbath because this is a day when I bless them. What a blessing. That's just awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, perhaps we'll need to head towards a conclusion. What would you take from our discussion on the Sabbath so far? And just to say to everybody, we will still talk about the Sabbath next time we are together. And that's going to be in the new year, because now we're heading for the festive season, and there will be 4 Sabbaths in December, which will be specific for recognizing the birth, the incarnation, the birth of the Lord Jesus. But in the new year, we'll continue still talking about the Sabbath. So there are not 12 or 13 commandments, there are still 10. But I believe the Sabbath deserves far greater attention than broader expansion than some of the others. What do you take from things so far?
Well, lots of things, but the thing that's crossing my mind right now is the Sabbath was made as a day to commemorate creation, okay? And when we accept Jesus into our lives as our Lord, as our Master, as our best friend, he says to us, you are a new creation. What a wonderful way to think about what the Sabbath is. A time of recreation, God recreating his character in us.
Yeah. And through us.
To the world.
To the world.
To the world around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a blessing.
It is a blessing.
It's so much more than just a day off from the drudgery. It's so much more than that.
Yeah. For me, there is one very important aspect of the Sabbath that I'm trying to convey repeatedly, and that is there are 10 commandments. Okay? The first 3 deal exclusively with God. From commandment 5 all the way to 10, the other 6 deal exclusively with our relationship with others. And the Sabbath sits on the hinge between the two. And the Sabbath, in the wording itself, both recognizes God and other people.
It's a pivot point.
It is a pivot point.
Yeah.
You can't run away from it. In order to appreciate the Sabbath, we need to have a good understanding of God, of who God is. Without a solid understanding of God, the Sabbath will lose its meaning, and the rest of the commandments will go wonky in one direction or another. We need to connect with God in a mature way, in an intelligent way, in an open way. We need to allow him to reveal himself to us and seek it. And we discussed that in commandments number 1, 2, and 3. When we come to the Sabbath, we need to absorb both. We need to absorb God with a good understanding, and we need to look at the others through the lens of this God which revealed himself to us. So when we come to commandment number 5, it will deal with my immediate family. All right? And from there, it will expand to the larger community. Okay? But I will only be able to do that if I have a good understanding of God, and I believe the Sabbath gives me the opportunity to reset, to reconnect, to regain an understanding of who I am in light of who God is, so that I am able to live in good community relationships with those around me, like the other commandments will outline. So Sabbath is crucial. Sabbath is the weekly coming back, okay, to reflect on God and reflect on others as well as myself. Okay, so Sabbath is not about do this, do that, do the other, though it's helpful to know what limits and boundaries are there for myself as a human being. Sabbath is an invitation. Sabbath is a come hither, come into my presence, and let's reason together. And when we manage to do that well, I believe it will be a blessing to us, it will bring credit to God, and it will be a blessing to those around. So that's what we are inviting everyone to do. Don't settle for a hand-me-down list of do this and don't do that. Okay? Take control of this gift that God has given you. The Sabbath was made for you. All right? God gave it to you. God gave himself in the Sabbath to you. All right? The best way to value this gift that God gives us is to take it, to unwrap it, to explore it, to work with it together with God. So we pray and hope that Sabbath you'll discover new aspects and facets of the Sabbath as you engage with God and one another, and as the weekly time comes and goes. I pray that this separation from one another will come to an end very, very soon, because we're struggling, all of us. We're struggling. We're missing this community. Imperfect as we are missing this community. We pray that this time of isolation will come to an end. We pray that you stay well. We're struggling emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially, and we're not here physically to support one another. And we do pray that through this experience, somehow, forced by the circumstances, we'll draw closer to God and let him whisper in our ears every day, every week, who we are in his eyes, how precious, how valuable, how important we are to him, not because of what we do and that, but because of who he is and how he looks at us. This is our prayer, Daniel, for our church, for those who are watching with us. And we will be catching up together in this setup in the new year.
Yeah.
So until then,
Look forward to it.
may God be with you and make the most of every Sabbath. Amen.